"So this is the new life you wanted," Olivia Harper whispered under her breath as she stepped into the grand ballroom, the towering ceilings lined with crystal chandeliers that refracted light across the polished marble floor. Guests turned as her heels clicked sharply, the sound slicing through the soft hum of conversation, and Ethan Collins froze mid-toast, his eyes widening as if he hadn't expected her presence, the woman he once claimed to love now standing with an air of composed elegance that made the room feel smaller, more intimate, even with 100 pairs of eyes on them. Olivia's gaze swept over the crowd, lingering just long enough on faces filled with curiosity and whispered gossip, her jaw set, lips pressed in a faint line that suggested both calm and a barely restrained satisfaction, the memory of the years she had poured into a love that had been betrayed flashing in her mind like quick snapshots of laughter, shared mornings with coffee steaming between their hands, and then the abrupt coldness, the dismissal, the shadow of a mistress that had taken over what she had once considered safe and permanent. She adjusted the strap of her tailored dress, the color a soft champagne that caught the light without screaming for attention, each movement deliberate, measured, a quiet statement of self-possession, and as she stepped closer to the center of the room, a sudden hush fell, the music seeming to dip for a heartbeat, and Ethan's hand twitched at his side, holding a glass of sparkling champagne that now felt heavier than ever, his smile faltering, the confident mask cracking as he recognized that Olivia Harper had returned not to plead, not to beg, but to observe, to witness, and perhaps in some subtle, indiscernible way, to reclaim a piece of dignity that he had assumed he could erase. The murmur of the crowd rose again, a tapestry of curiosity and intrigue, but Olivia's eyes never left him, steady, unflinching, carrying with them the quiet weight of every unspoken word, every moment of humiliation endured in silence, every plan meticulously considered in the quiet hours after heartbreak, and the light from the chandeliers glinted off her hair as she moved past tables, nodding slightly to acquaintances without a single word, leaving a trail of quiet tension in her wake, and though she did not speak, her presence alone made the air thrum with expectation, the room bending subtly to the gravity of her resolve, a signal to anyone watching that while she had once been underestimated, she was no longer merely a shadow of someone's past, but a force entirely her own, poised, ready, and unmistakably present. In the quiet of her apartment the morning after the unexpected encounter, Olivia Harper moved through the sunlit space with deliberate calm, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling the air as she carried a small porcelain cup to the window, her eyes tracing the familiar skyline that had witnessed both her dreams and her heartbreak. The streets below were already alive with the rush of cars and pedestrians, each person absorbed in their own rhythm, unaware that a life had shifted irreversibly. The night before, yet Olivia felt no need for spectacle, only the slow, deliberate rebuilding of herself, brick by brick, moment by moment, each decision a small assertion of independence, each breath a claim on the air she had once shared with someone who no longer deserved it. She lingered at her desk, opening a sleek laptop, the cursor blinking patiently, and she began to write plans, ideas, strategies, the foundation for the small business she had envisioned for years but had postponed in favor of a love that had proved temporary, her fingers moving over the keys with purpose, punctuated by occasional sips of coffee, the steam rising like faint whispers of resilience, and as she reviewed her notes, she felt the quiet satisfaction of creativity, the thrill of imagining a future entirely her own, untethered from the shadows of betrayal. The apartment was modest yet elegant, each piece carefully chosen to reflect a sense of personal style, warm neutral tones accented with brushed metal and glass that caught the morning light, a space that was both sanctuary and canvas, where Olivia could plot, plan and dream without interruption or judgment, and she moved from desk to balcony, inhaling the crisp spring air, the city hum below a distant murmur, allowing herself to remember briefly the ache of the past, yet without letting it define the present. She had enrolled in business workshops, read stacks of industry journals, and met with mentors who offered guidance and insight, each encounter layering her knowledge, confidence and poise, and now, after months of disciplined work, she was beginning to see the first tangible results, a prototype launched, a website live, small but promising metrics that hinted at growth and independence, a reminder that the world was still wide, open and full of possibility. A message pinged on her phone, brief and professional, from a mentor she admired, suggesting a networking event later in the week, a chance to meet people of influence, to see doors previously closed begin to crack open, and as Olivia considered the invitation, She felt the familiar thrill of anticipation mixed with the grounded certainty of preparation, understanding that every step taken now was a quiet reclaiming of power that had once been denied. She arranged her notes, highlighted key contacts, reviewed her presentation with meticulous care, and in these hours of measured focus, she felt a subtle but growing confidence, the type that does not shout but resonates, a calm assurance that would carry her forward when the moment to step back into the public world arrived. And as the sun climbed higher, illuminating every corner of her apartment, Olivia Harper sipped the last of her coffee, eyes steady on the horizon, aware that the journey ahead would require patience, strategy, and grace, but certain that she had learned the lessons of the past, harnessed the strength of solitude, and was ready to transform opportunity into triumph, each choice, each step, each deliberate motion, a testament to her resilience and the beginning of the story she was now authoring herself. The evening sky stretched over the city as Olivia Harper arrived at the sleek rooftop event, the skyline sparkling like a field of stars beneath her gaze, and she felt the familiar thrill of anticipation mixed with the calm certainty that comes from preparation and patience. She stepped onto the terrace, heels clicking softly against the polished wood floor, the cool breeze brushing against her carefully styled hair and tailored dress that shimmered subtly under the ambient lighting, and for a moment the chatter of guests seemed distant, the city hummed below a quiet backdrop to the focused energy she carried, each step measured, deliberate, a reflection of her own growth and the quiet power she had cultivated since the days of heartbreak and betrayal. Across the terrace, Ethan Collins laughed loudly, his new wife at his side, their gestures exaggerated, almost performative, drawing attention from the cluster of influential guests who were unaware that Olivia Harper was the unseen variable in the equation, the presence that would quietly shift the dynamics without uttering a single confrontational word. And she allowed herself a small, composed smile, not of triumph, but of acknowledgement of her own strength, the awareness that she had endured, rebuilt, and arrived at a place where dignity was her most formidable weapon. As she moved among the attendees, exchanging polite nods and measured greetings, the subtle recognition in the eyes of some who remembered the past moments of humiliation hinted at the ripple she was already creating, the realization that Olivia Harper was no longer defined by the echoes of a failed marriage but by the steady, luminous force of her presence, commanding attention without demanding it, and her eyes occasionally flicked to Ethan, noting the slight tension in his posture, the fleeting glance of uncertainty, a contrast to the bold confidence he had displayed earlier, and she held that gaze for a heartbeat longer than necessary, allowing the silent acknowledgement of past wrongs to settle in the space between them, a quiet claim of moral victory and self-possession. The mentor who had been guiding her throughout her rebirth emerged from the crowd, and Olivia felt a subtle surge of reassurance, the shared understanding of strategy and presence linking them without a word. A partnership that spoke through poise and intent rather than loud declarations. And as the mentor casually introduced her to key figures, potential collaborators, and industry leaders, Olivia moved with effortless grace, each handshake, each brief conversation, a testament to the competence and authority she had cultivated, the invisible scaffolding of her renewed life now visible to those who watched closely, including Ethan, whose earlier nonchalance was now punctuated with the first hints of apprehension as he registered the shift in the room. She paused at the edge of the terrace, looking out over the city lights, the music and laughter behind her a soft murmur, and in that quiet moment, she allowed herself the satisfaction of a long journey recognized not with shouts or confrontation but with the simple, undeniable presence of someone who had endured, learned, and returned stronger, leaving a palpable tension in the air that suggested the story was far from over, that the next moments would carry weight and expectation, and that the transformation of Olivia Harper from a shadow of past humiliation to a luminous, composed force was complete, yet ongoing. A narrative unfolding silently yet undeniably before all who were watching. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Olivia Harper's apartment, casting long patterns across the polished hardwood floors as she stood at the edge of her balcony, inhaling the crisp spring air and letting the quiet hum of the city below settle around her like a gentle promise. The previous night's event still lingered in her mind, the flicker of surprised faces and subtle shifts in posture marking the beginning of a new chapter she had long envisioned, and she felt the familiar thrill of possibility coursing through her as she moved to her desk to review the plan she had laid out meticulously, each note, each sketch, each email representing small victories over a past filled with quiet humiliation and disrupted trust. She opened her laptop, the screen illuminating her focused expression as she arranged her calendar, scheduled meetings with potential collaborators, and outlined strategies for the next stages of her startup. Each click and keystroke deliberate and filled with purpose, reflecting a precision honed through months of preparation, reflection, and disciplined effort. And as she organized her workspace, the subtle sound of her fingers moving across the keys punctuated the calm of the morning, blending seamlessly with the distant city sounds that rose and fell like waves against the walls of her apartment, reinforcing the sense that life was moving forward at the exact pace she had chosen. A message notification blinked gently in the corner of the screen, a note from her mentor suggesting a private lunch to discuss new opportunities, and Olivia's lips curved into a slight, knowing smile as she accepted, recognizing not only the practical benefits but the symbolic gesture that she was now being seen and taken seriously in a sphere she had once been excluded from, her confidence growing quietly yet steadily with each interaction, a reflection of the work and insight she had gathered since walking away from a relationship that had once defined her in ways she no longer allowed. She moved around her apartment, straightening a few papers, adjusting the light to reflect the warm tones of her decor, the space itself a mirror of the balance she sought in life, clean, orderly, inviting, and yet assertive in its presence, and she paused at a small table near the window where a fresh cup of coffee awaited her, inhaling the aroma as a reminder that small pleasures could coexist with great ambitions, grounding her even as she charted bold plans for the future. After a brief moment of reflection, she turned her attention to a call scheduled with a potential client, her voice steady, articulate, and imbued with the authority that had taken months to cultivate, her words carrying weight without needing to assert dominance, and she felt the subtle thrill of recognition as her proposals were met with thoughtful consideration and enthusiasm, confirming that her efforts were translating into real-world impact, and that the foundation she was building was not only practical but emblematic of her resilience and intelligence. By mid-afternoon, Olivia had wrapped up her communications, reviewing notes from her mentor, and taking a moment to enjoy the view from her balcony once again. The city sprawled beneath her as a reminder of the vast opportunities that awaited each building, each street, a canvas upon which she could paint the story of her own choosing, the quiet strength and strategic thought that she brought to each decision reinforcing the knowledge that her life was now defined by her own choices and not by the shadows of past relationships, a sense of freedom that was at once exhilarating and grounding. And as the sunlight shifted toward the horizon, Olivia Harper sipped her coffee, eyes steady and bright, fully aware that the step she was taking today would carry her into tomorrow with grace, authority, and the quiet, undeniable force of someone who had claimed her space, her time, and her future. The afternoon sun cast a warm glow across the polished lobby as Olivia Harper stepped into the glass-walled atrium, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor, each step measured and deliberate, carrying with it a quiet confidence honed over months of preparation, reflection, and disciplined effort. The air was filled with the soft murmur of conversations, the clinking of coffee cups, and the occasional burst of laughter, yet Olivia moved through it with an almost imperceptible calm, her eyes scanning the room, noting the subtle interactions of those around her, the slight hesitations, the gestures of recognition and curiosity, and she allowed herself a small, composed smile as she acknowledged familiar faces without interrupting the flow of their discussions, understanding that presence alone could communicate more than words ever could. As she approached a central table where a small group had gathered, Olivia recognized the figure of her mentor. Tall, composed, exuding a quiet authority that immediately drew attention, and she felt the familiar surge of reassurance, the unspoken knowledge that they were aligned in purpose and vision, a partnership built on mutual respect, insight, and strategy, each aware of the other's strengths without the need for overt declarations. Introductions followed, Olivia gracefully moving through the exchange of names, handshakes firm yet gentle, eyes meeting eyes in moments of connection that conveyed competence, intelligence, and integrity, and with each interaction, she felt her own confidence solidifying, a tangible presence that rippled subtly through the room, capturing attention without seeking it, influencing perception without a single word of assertion. As the discussion shifted to opportunities and collaborations, Olivia listened carefully, contributing thoughtfully when necessary, her ideas precise, measured, and strategically aligned with her long-term vision, the group responding with interest and respect, and she felt the satisfaction of being seen and taken seriously in a sphere that had once seemed distant or unattainable. her professional identity now fully realized and acknowledged by those around her. During a brief pause, she stepped to the side, observing the room from a slightly elevated perspective, the afternoon light casting patterns across the polished floors and reflecting off the glass walls. And in that moment, she allowed herself to reflect on the journey that had brought her here. The months of disciplined work, the quiet rebuilding of self, the small victories that compounded into significant achievement, and the sense of power and independence that came from creating her own path rather than relying on anyone else's approval or validation. As the meeting continued, Olivia noticed Ethan Collins entering the atrium, his confident stride masking the subtle tension that she recognized immediately. And while he was accompanied by others, there was an unmistakable shift in the energy of the space, the awareness of her presence altering perception, not through confrontation, but through the quiet force of her success and composure, a reminder that the narrative she now authored was entirely her own. By the time the session concluded, Olivia Harper had not only navigated complex interactions with grace and precision, but also left an indelible impression on everyone present, a subtle demonstration of capability, poise, and strategic insight, the kind of influence that does not demand attention yet commands it effortlessly. And as she stepped back into the sunlight, the city sprawling before her, she felt a deep, steady satisfaction. The knowledge that she was moving confidently into the next stage of her journey, prepared to leverage every opportunity, and fully aware that the quiet power she had cultivated would continue to guide her through every encounter, every decision, and every step of her unfolding story. Evening settled over the city as Olivia Harper prepared for the event that would mark the culmination of months of planning. Her apartment bathed in the warm, golden light of the setting sun as she moved with deliberate grace from her desk to the vanity, adjusting a sleek dress that reflected both elegance and understated confidence, the soft hum of the city below reminding her that life was moving forward, moment by moment, and that she was in control of the pace and direction of her own narrative. She paused by the window, gazing out at the skyline, the towers of glass and steel catching the last rays of sunlight, and felt a familiar sense of calm anticipation, a blend of readiness and purpose, knowing that each step she took tonight would carry weight not through volume or force, but through the quiet assertion of presence, poise, and cultivated authority. Arriving at the venue, Olivia navigated the crowd with effortless composure, her heels clicking softly on the polished floors, her eyes scanning the room, noting the subtle shifts in attention as guests turned to acknowledge her, some with polite recognition, others with barely concealed curiosity, all sensing that something about her had changed, that the woman standing among them was no longer the same person who had once quietly endured humiliation but had become someone whose presence carried an unmistakable gravity. Across the room, Ethan Collins moved with practiced charm, his laughter directed at acquaintances, gestures expansive and deliberate, yet Olivia noted the tension beneath his smile, the brief faltering of confidence as their eyes met, and she allowed herself a small, composed smile, not of triumph but of awareness, understanding that her journey had brought her to this exact moment. The balance of power quietly but undeniably shifted, and that recognition alone was a measure of her accomplishment. The mentor who had guided her through the transformation appeared by her side, subtle cues exchanged through glances and slight nods, reinforcing the partnership that had helped her navigate the intricate social landscape. And as Olivia engaged in conversations with influential figures, she moved seamlessly between discussion, observation, and thoughtful contribution, her words measured, her demeanor composed, each interaction building upon the quiet impression of capability, strategy, and refined presence, the room responding in kind, the energy subtly bending around her without a single overt declaration. A brief pause brought Olivia to the balcony, where the evening air was cool and the city lights stretched below like a tapestry of potential, and she inhaled deeply, letting the moment reinforce her sense of agency, reflecting on the deliberate steps that had brought her here. Months of work, disciplined focus, and a cultivation of confidence that had turned the experience of past heartbreak into a foundation for professional and personal empowerment. Returning to the main event, she observed Ethan's gestures, the slight hesitation in his movements now more pronounced, the crowd subtly reacting to the presence she projected, and Olivia recognized the power of composure, how being fully in control of her own narrative allowed her influence to ripple through the room without confrontation, each glance, each subtle motion conveying authority and self-possession. As the evening progressed, Olivia Harper moved through the gathering with quiet purpose, forming connections, reinforcing relationships, and positioning herself strategically in the eyes of those whose attention mattered, all the while aware of the silent, transformative effect her presence had on Ethan, the shift in energy undeniable yet unspoken, and by the time she prepared to leave, the impression she had made was both clear and profound, a testament to her journey from past humiliation to present strength, leaving the evening with the knowledge that every choice she had made, every step she had taken, had been a deliberate act of reclaiming power, autonomy, and the quiet dignity that would carry her forward into the next chapter of her life. The moment arrived with a quiet intensity as Olivia Harper stood beside her mentor, the low hum of the gala fading into the background as a hush seemed to sweep across the room. Guests paused mid-conversation, their attention subtly drawn to the center where the announcement was about to be made, and in that charged silence, Olivia's composed presence radiated authority and elegance, her posture straight, shoulders back, eyes steady, and the faintest curve of her lips suggested confidence. Without arrogance, a force that required no words to command notice, Ethan Collins shifted uncomfortably, sensing the undercurrent of anticipation and the way the room's energy had subtly shifted toward Olivia. His once assured demeanor now marked by a brief flicker of uncertainty, a reminder that control and influence were not solely measured by volume or social display, but by quiet confidence and strategic presence. The master of ceremonies approached, microphone in hand, and began to speak. His tone cordial but attentive, a prelude to the revelation that would follow, and Olivia maintained a calm, steady gaze, listening to the words, observing the reactions of the crowd, aware that the moment had been carefully orchestrated not through confrontation, but through the deliberate unveiling of truth and recognition. As the speaker mentioned a key partnership, the mentor stepped forward subtly, gesturing toward Olivia in a manner that drew attention without dramatics, and a collective awareness began to ripple through the guests, the recognition dawning that Olivia Harper was not merely an attendee, but a central figure in this unfolding narrative, her achievements and strategic positioning now undeniable, a revelation that shifted the balance of perception instantly. Ethan's expression tightened imperceptibly, the shift in energy palpable as whispers began circulating, the realization setting in that the authority and influence Olivia now embodied were recognized publicly, not through boast or spectacle, but through the clear and deliberate acknowledgement of those whose judgment carried weight. And as the mentor introduced Olivia formally, the room responded with polite applause, some nodding in respect, others exchanging subtle glances that conveyed surprise, admiration, and the quiet understanding of her journey and accomplishments. Olivia's voice, calm and measured, was heard as she expressed gratitude briefly, her words precise, reflecting poise and intelligence, her tone neither defensive nor confrontational, and the simple act of speaking with authority reinforced the transformation of perception among those present. The contrast with Ethan's earlier displays of dominance now stark in its quiet clarity, his posture subtly betraying the awareness that the dynamics of influence had shifted irrevocably. As the applause settled, Olivia took a few steps back, allowing the momentum of the moment to resonate naturally, her eyes sweeping the room, noting faces lit with acknowledgement and respect, and though she did not seek to demean or belittle, the implicit impact was unmistakable, a testament to the power of preparation, patience, and composure, demonstrating that influence and recognition could be achieved through dignity and strategic presence rather than overt assertion. The evening continued, but the turning point had passed, a subtle but decisive shift in the narrative now in place, Olivia Harper's place recognized, her presence fully acknowledged, and as she glanced briefly at Ethan, she noted the quiet acknowledgement of change, the unspoken recognition that while he had attempted to command attention and influence through traditional displays, her quiet authority and carefully cultivated poise had achieved a result far more compelling and enduring, leaving the room to absorb the significance of the moment and the undeniable truth that Olivia Harper had stepped fully into the center of her own story. The night had deepened and the gala began to wind down, yet Olivia Harper remained poised at the edge of the room, her presence quiet yet undeniably commanding, the subtle glint of the chandeliers reflecting off her dress as she observed the final moments of the evening with a sense of serene accomplishment, every interaction she had navigated now converging into a coherent narrative of personal triumph and professional recognition. Ethan Collins lingered near the bar, attempting to engage with other guests, yet the earlier tension he had felt had not fully dissipated, and Olivia could see the subtle changes in his demeanor, the brief hesitation in his gestures, the fleeting uncertainty in his smile, all silent indicators of the shift she had orchestrated without confrontation, each movement, glance, and poised step having reinforced the presence she carried so effortlessly. As she moved toward the exit, Olivia allowed her gaze to sweep the room one last time, acknowledging familiar faces with a subtle nod, exchanging brief words that conveyed confidence and gratitude, each interaction reinforcing the sense of accomplishment that had been quietly built over months of preparation, reflection, and disciplined effort. And as she walked through the final clusters of attendees, she noted the respectful attention, the murmurs of acknowledgement, the subtle recognition that she was no longer merely part of the background, but a central figure whose presence shaped perception and demanded consideration. Stepping onto the quiet street outside, the cool night air brushing against her face, Olivia inhaled deeply, allowing herself a moment to reflect on the journey she had traversed, from the initial pain and humiliation of betrayal to the meticulous, patient construction of a life defined by her own terms, her achievements, and the quiet authority that now accompanied her. A force that did not need to be shouted to be felt, and a strength that emanated from knowledge, composure, and resilience. The city lights stretched before her like a canvas of endless opportunity, each street and building reflecting the possibilities she had worked to claim, and she felt the satisfaction of knowing that she had transformed every setback into a stepping stone, every moment of doubt into motivation, and every observation of past humiliation into a lesson in strategic patience and personal growth, the narrative of her life now fully her own to write. As she paused to glance back at the gala, now a soft glow behind reflective windows, Olivia realized that the power of her journey lay not in the drama of confrontation but in the meticulous, quiet assertion of her presence, her intellect, and her dignity, creating ripples of recognition and respect without a single act of spectacle. And in that moment, the subtle acknowledgement she sensed in Ethan's expression, the unspoken awareness of what had shifted, became less about him and more about the internal victory she had cultivated through self-mastery, resilience, and the quiet execution of strategy. Stepping forward into the night, Olivia Harper moved with calm certainty, each step a measured claim on her future, the cool breeze mingling with the faint hum of the city, every detail of the evening now part of a larger tapestry she had authored. And as she disappeared into the glowing streets, the story of transformation, dignity, and self-possession remained, an enduring reminder that the most profound victories are often silent, deeply felt, and wholly personal, leaving the impression that she did not need to win anyone back, for she had won herself.